Did you all receive, I sent you an email with the various scenarios we're going to cover?
Yes.
Okay. Glad you have it, because I don't think I have it in front of me. But scenario one, would someone mind reading what that is? So just that brief statement.
Carrie, scenario one, new youth as of 1/10/17.
Thank you. So Miss Carrie joined our program, is being served by newbie staff. And you have her case number and person number. So Carrie, our young person who was enrolled as of January 10th. So this is a brand new young person starting this month. So you would fill out your report. Month is January, so we're assuming we're in February right now. You filled, this report is for the month of January. The date that you sent it to your DHS worker was February 15th. I am your DHS worker, your enroll date. You're clicking this first 90 days because this is brand new youth, so you are going to be billing for the youth engagement services as well as your regular ILP services, and this lets Jenny know, who's here in the room with me, that you are working on your first 90 days. So the next section is when were your one-on-one dates. So you saw that young person January 15th, January 25th. You also had phone calls and voice mails with them, as well as text and emails. Carrie also attended your Cooking Healthy work group on the 19th of January. Your due dates for your life skills assessment, your youth transition plan, and then the benchmark reviews, those are all due. You haven't done them yet. So you would just put due over on that section and then the date that they are due. So the date for the life skills assessment and that transition plan is the end of, that date is your 90th day. Okay? So as we scroll down on your monthly progress report, so Carrie is not working. She's enrolled full-time at Tualatin High School. And we're not closing, so you're going to ignore that entire section there. Now because you just started serving Carrie and you have not assessed her yet, or you haven't finished, you may have started, but you haven't finished assessing her, you are not able to fill out this section. So you will leave this blank. And Jenny is going to know that that's okay because you have the first 90-day box checked. So then, as we continue down the report, you didn't have any barriers because, as you'll see in my notes that are in newbie staff's notes, that on the 10th, you called the foster parent to arrange a meeting with Carrie. On the 15th, you conducted intake with Carrie. You completed the paperwork, the Kairos paperwork, intake paperwork, and began the discussion guide. On the 19th, Carrie showed up for group. On the 20th, and the reason I have that bolded, it's bolded here as well as I bolded it up above, is to help catch Jenny's attention so that, well, we won't be, because you didn't fill anything out up here yet, again, because you don't know where you're staging Carrie at, right? You haven't finished your assessment process, so you don't know what stage she's at, but she came to a workshop and you want to get credit, if you will, for having provided that service. What Jenny will do is take a look and either up above where it says group session attended, or here in your notes as to if there are services that you provided that young person, she will then go into the Unbundler, not the regular page where we do your monthlies, but we have a different page where she can enter in services that anyone provides. And she will enter in that Kairos provided miscellaneous life skills under, and did the healthy cooking. So that will help you get credit for providing that service. And then you met at Starbucks to continue the discussion guide with Carrie because she loves her Starbucks. And then and then chai teas for Carrie. And then you also talked to her caseworker about Carrie's participation. So you notice I don't have any minutes listed here. There's just these brief notes about when you met and what you did when you did see them, or calls that you placed. Any questions about brand new youth coming on and what your monthly progress report might look like?
Rosemary, this is Dana. I just want to confirm that the impact sends over our notes. So we do not have to do the box on the second page, correct?
So you attach them, is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
As long as they're with your monthly progress report.
Yes, they come together.
Yep, that's fine. First thing you need to know for your youth engagement services is you or whoever fills out your invoices. This is the same template that everyone uses, so that you've been using for your regular monthly ILP billing. It's the same document, same spreadsheet. There are 3 tabs in that spreadsheet. You have contract invoice, 1/12 payments, and then invoice instructions. For the youth engagement services, you are using the first tab, the one that says contract invoice. That is very important that you use the correct invoice for your billing. If you use the wrong invoice, we have no choice but to send it back to you and to tell you to please fill out the correct invoice. Okay? So very important. Make sure whoever's doing your billing understands which invoice to use. So you fill out, as you have always done, the upper section, who your provider is. We would fill out DHS portion once it comes to us. And so for Carrie, right, that's our first row. You're filling out your contract number, who the caseworker is, case number. You don't need to fill in anything under that foster provider / subcontractor. Your participant name, number, the service category, and service type. This is what it should read. ILP contract payment, youth engagement services as the type. Your service start date, because she's brand new this month, her start date is January 10th. You always only bill for that particular month. Our rate is $10 per day. You served Carrie for 21 days that month, which equals $210. You have no service outcome because you're still working with Carrie, so you have not completed this service yet. And then out here in the outer corners, you see here in this cell is the start date. We put this in ourselves, so you can do this for yourself if you want, but we wanted to know what the end date was, so wherever you're tracking that, this is just what these dates are sitting out here on this invoice. This was the date that we accepted the referral, accepted that youth into our program, and then our calculation, if you look up here into our cell, it simply says, take this particular day and add 89 days, and that is what's giving us our end date. So that's going to help Jenny compare once she gets your invoice to the paperwork.
Okay, Rosemary, sorry, I just had a question. Should I save it till the end?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. The service start date and service end date, and then the ones that we put in for the invoices. I'm sorry, what specific days do those reference?
So the start date, in this scenario, I'll show you a bunch of different scenarios as I have on that sheet, some that started a while ago, but in this particular scenario, this is the first day that I started serving the youth in the month. And it is always only the 1 month billing. So you would list January 10th is when we accepted this referral, and January 31st, because we served her for the entire month. Again, we're assuming we're in February right now, so you're filling out this invoice for last month, which was January. I know that's a little odd, but you will see as we get there, we have, oh, that went way too fast. Young people who started in October, but their end date is January 7th, so we have January 1st and our last day of January 7th. So we'll go through those scenarios as well. So it all depends on when they started and when they ended as to what dates you're listing there, but never earlier than the first of that month or later than the last day of the month that you're billing for. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so what I have is that it's the referral acceptance date is the service start date, and then the end of the month for the end date.
Correct. Or
okay,
whatever
perfect.
date, unless they closed in the month sometime, then you would list that close date.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And then for the same, so we're going to look at Carrie now because you're also going to continue your regular 1/12 monthly billing. So you'll see the difference here is we don't list a rate because we don't need a rate. That's calculated upstairs in our payment department. Based on, again, if Carrie, we billed for her from the January 10th through the end of the month. It looks the same because she started in January. You'll see the Haley below her started, I believe, in a previous month. So we served her for the entire month of January on our 1/12 contract. So that went from January to January. So I don't believe I made up. Carrie, will you read the scenario for Haley?
Sure. Haley is scenario 2, and she is halfway through the 90-day period.
Okay. So this is now Haley started, get to the correct tab, my cheat sheet, December 15th. So for those who were actually contracted, or even anybody. So if you are most of you, your contract starts January 1, except for those 9 pilot sites. So for you, even though she started in December, you still have a portion. So the first 90 days is always just the first 90 days, right? Whether you could bill for them or whether you couldn't bill for them, it is still from day 1 to the 90th day. That never changes. And you'll see and I don't think I put in a scenario where you stop and start again, but I will talk about that. So for Haley, you're billing for the entire month because even though you started on February 15th, you still have until March 14th to bill for the first 90 days. So she will show up on your billing for all of, she was there for the 15 days in February. She's there for all of January. Or the 15 days of December, sorry. She'll be there for all of January, all of February, and 14 days in March. That is your total 90 days. Any questions on that? Okay.
Rosemary is Jennifer. We have a question in chat from Dana. Can you review the piece about the calculation on determining the 90th day?
Sure. So I just added it here. We also sent that little Excel spreadsheet out for you all. If you need that again, we can send that again. That has the calculation. But if you know Excel and you can do formulas, it's fairly easy. So we entered your start date in one cell. And then in the next cell, we simply said equals sum, and then your bracket. We clicked on, well, let me just do that for you. So we said equals, and then sum, put the bracket, and then you click on your start date, and you have to hit plus 89 days and your end bracket, and then hit enter. And that gives you your last day, because it counts the first day as 1 and adds 89 days to it to equal 90. So that is how we came up with our end date. So you know when to stop billing on your youth engagement services. Okay? So that was Haley. Again, you see Haley for the entire month because she continues on your 1/12 contract billing. For, who do we have next? Jennifer Martin, sitting next to me. She was a young person who started, looks like October 10th. And so again, she's in the middle of her, or actually she's in the end of her 90 days this month, right? Her end date is January 7th because that's her 90th day. Your contract still has you requiring you to submit your assessment and your transition plan within that 90-day period. So even though for our brand new providers who just got their amendment in January, Unfortunately, you couldn't bill for those prior 90 days, but you also weren't doing the more intensive work. And well, maybe you were, but you were doing the old. You might have done the Casey Life Skills Assessment with that young person already. And now these last couple of days, or yeah, the last 7 days, if you hadn't done your transition plan, you need to make sure and get that done in these 7 days with Jennifer. So you're going to bill for those last 7 days, and you're going to say that you achieved, assuming you got all of your paperwork done and Jennifer is continuing in your program. So this invoice would be marked achieved, and let me bring that up a little bit so that you can actually. Now, if you go to your 1/12 payments for Jennifer, so Jennifer ended January 7th, your youth engagement services. You billed for $70. On your 1/12 billing, Jennifer continues in your program. So you actually served her regular ILP services through the end of the month because she stayed continuing with you. So, oh, my bad. See, that's what happens when you copy and paste. This should say 31 days because you served her the entire month. And you have no outcome because she's still working with you. So that's how you, any questions on how you bill for somebody who you're at the tail end of the youth engagement services. So you're at the tail end of that 90 days. Okay. So our next scenario, Carrie, do you want to read the next?
Sure. Our next scenario is Kevin, who dropped out in the first 30 days, and you're supposed to close all ILP services.
So Kevin started December 15th. However, you met with him on January 6th, and he said, sorry, really don't want to deal with you guys. I'm leaving the program. So you close him out the 6th. You get to bill for 6 days, and you have to, because you're closing them, list a outcome for your youth engagement services. So this is what Jenny will use when she goes into our system to close that service out. So in this case, it's not achieved. You didn't finish the paperwork. You were just getting started with him. So you didn't finish paperwork, and he's not continuing. So that's a not achieved. And then for Kevin on your 1/12 invoice, you bill again from the 1st through the 6th, 6 days, and again, it's not achieved. Any questions on, oh, and so let me take a look at the, so you have Kevin George. All the top information, you guys know how to fill that out. So he enrolled December 15th. You have the box checked that says yes. Sorry. Yes, still in first 90 days. You saw him on January 6th. You had placed some phone calls making sure he was going to show up. These were the dates when your documents were going to be due. You knew enough to say that he wasn't working. He was enrolled full-time, 9th grade. But now this is when you're filling out the close section. So you're closing this client January 6th of 2017, and your close reason is not achieved. And because you had not been able to complete your assessment, again, you won't have anything filled out in the middle section. So I think this is going to be a rare scenario, but I wanted to provide it to you. Now, had you been working with Kevin, and so here's our youth is not interested. 1/6, Kevin showed for a meeting and advised that he was no longer wanting to participate. And on the 7th, you talked to the caseworker and said that you and Kevin signed the services availability letter, and you're going to be sending that off to your caseworker, and you're closing this case. Questions on documenting a youth who leaves prior to the end of the 90 days? Okay. So with that, we're going to move on to our next person. So the next person, who is our next person, Carrie?
Chris
Berg. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the invoice because I did not do a progress report for Chris. I don't believe. I think I did one for Matt. So Chris Berg, what's her story?
In the final month, it's in the final month, but DHS moved prior to finishing the transition plan, close all ILP services.
Okay. So she was referred October 27th. You had until January 24th to finish everything. The assessment summary, and the transition plan. Unfortunately, you had a meeting set later in the month to finalize that transition plan, and they moved Chris on you. So you're billing from the 1st to the 5th, your $10 rate, but you're also closing. So you're billing for the 5 days. And on Chris, you actually had completed the discussion guide, and you did the assessment summary. You were working towards completing the transition plan, but you just didn't get there. So for Chris, you're going to list her as partially achieved. What the billing would look like for Chris, who you were moving along, doing great progress, but all of a sudden she up and moved for whatever reason. DHS moved her. So you're going to list that as partially achieved. And on the 1/12 for Chris, again, the same thing, same dates, the 1st through the 5th, and that you partially achieved. Because she was with you, I'm not going to say not achieved, even though you didn't set any goals and you didn't do the transition plan, because for that 90 days, what you were expected to complete, you partially achieved. Does that make sense to you all? Hopefully, if I don't hear a no, I'm going to assume it does. Again, it's even though maybe, like I said, you didn't do the transition plan, you did the discussion guide, you did your assessment, you were preparing to do the plan, and because of DHS move, you couldn't achieve that. So I would put partially achieved. So our next young person is Matt. What's Matt's story? Carrie, if you wouldn't mind.
Youth has been served for over 4 months, continuing with ILP.
So because he's past the 90-day period, he would not show up on your monthly progress, or your invoice for youth engagement services. He is past the 90 days. These are the youth that you maybe have had for a year or two, and the question is, when do we switch over to this paperwork? You switch over at the end of January as you're filling out your monthly progress reports. So I'm going to switch there in a moment, but then, so Matt is not on your youth engagement invoice. However, Matt still would be on your regular 1/12 monthly billing because you are serving him and you're billing. And you would have been submitting your monthly billing from the time he started back in August or whenever it was he started. Okay? So let's try and switch back to the monthly progress report. Okay, we're also going to talk, and so before you could actually fill out your monthly progress report, you would actually have needed to complete your planning checklist for Matt. So this is what you will all be doing for those young people. And so the ILP worker is the one who's completing this. So for Matt, you worked on certain things this month and other things you didn't work on. So for all of those existing young people you have, you're going to use step 4 to help you determine where you're staging them to fill out your monthly progress report. So I didn't work with Matt on personal growth, or you didn't work with Matt on personal growth and social development. So you can leave that blank. You don't have to fill out anything because you did not provide those services. However, you did provide some services related to family support and healthy relationships. So you want to be able to go through, and even if you don't have the time to do each individual, maybe you can look at all of the skills that encompass family support and healthy relationships, and you can, knowing that you've worked with this young person for a while, you can go, yeah, they've got basic knowledge about most of these areas. Some of them we still need to do a little bit of work, but that'll be quick to move them up to stage 2. So I think he's a pretty solid one. So we're going to start working on stage 2. So if you're really crunched for time right now this month, you do not have to fill in all of these stages. But if you have the time, all of these stages will be able to help you determine what your overall open stage is. And that open stage is going to transition over to your monthly progress report, which I'll show you in a minute, but I don't want to leave this document yet. So there's the rest of that domain. There was a couple of areas where either didn't pertain to Matt, and so it's not something that you're working on right now, like parenting. He's not a parent, so we're not teaching responsible parenthood right at the moment, or parenting skills, and we haven't assessed that. So you can leave that blank. Health education, that was another area where you're preventing services. So you're going to take a look at the various stages that young person that might be at. And overall, again, even though you have some 1s and 2s, you also have some 3s. Matt is kind of a neat freak, and he does great with personal hygiene, always clean, dressed very nicely, clothes are clean. So he's doing it. He's a 3. However, there are other 1s and 2s. So overall, you're listing him as I'm teaching skills at stage 2. I'm opening him at stage 2. And just put a few notes in about some of the priorities. Matt doesn't want to connect with biofamily at this time, but he would like a better relationship with his caseworker, Rosemary Ivadetti. You know, she's a little rough sometimes. So teaching him how to interact and build a better relationship, he's interested in that. So that's something you're going to work on with him. And then note that he has excellent hygiene, but he does want to know more about healthy relationships. He has a girlfriend, so also that healthy sexuality piece of that as well. So these are pieces that can help you if you hadn't crafted your transition plan yet. So if this was a newer youth, then or if you're preparing for your 6-month update, then you would be looking at some of these notes to help you with your transition planning, as well as your service provision. For employment, again, we opened at stage 2. He, if you recall, actually you haven't seen his monthly progress yet. I believe Matt's working part-time at Burger King, so he has some of these skills, or definitely awareness in these areas. And so we're putting him at a stage 2. Even though he's out there working, he hasn't filed taxes. Oh, this is high school. Sorry, I'm talking about the wrong category. So he's in high school. Anyway, as you can see, let's see if I have notes down here for Matt. So everything, oh, I talked about employment. We're not even looking at that. So my notes were that he wants to join the baseball team. So he's going to need a glove, cleats, and some sports fees paid. So you're going to help him with that. You helped identify what he needs to graduate because he's not quite sure as far as credits or what classes he needs to take. And you're also going to help connect him to a school counselor. So those are some of the things that you want to do with him. And then again, daily living. So you all are getting the idea, right? Money management, housing, he's doing well, has a solid placement at this time. Transportation, it's not an issue at this time, but he works part-time, so you're going to help him with some money management skills. Also wants to open up a savings account, learn about good credit. So that is stage 4, how that can help you as you move to having to create your monthly progress reports for all of your young people. And Jennifer, is there anything, or Carrie, that you want to bring up while I'm searching for the correct program or the correct document from Matt?
Sure, this is Jennifer. I think on our last, when we did this last week, we sort of threw out the general question and realized that people might have a lot of general questions just about how do you know what to open, what services to open on the monthly progress report versus to close on kind of a, both initially after the first 90-day period and then on a month-to-month basis. So I know one of the things we talked about last week was the idea that there are going to be some domains driven by whatever you have on the step 2 life skills assessment, and then bolstering that with the information, the more specific, concrete, detailed list that's available in step 4, the checklist, that, and of course coming out of the transition plan and whatever the youth goals are, is that after that first, overall intake and planning period, you're going to pick a few to focus on based on what seems to be sort of emerging as the most important priorities for the youth. And so you may open, 3 or 4, maybe more, maybe less, and that might not change for a few months as you dive in and start working on these things. That their system is built to be sort of an intentional process and not kind of how we used to think about it, where you would want to fill out a checklist and make sure you recorded everything every month that you even touched on. This system is more meant to reflect, like, these are the main areas we're focusing on. So maybe you have a 15-minute conversation about another domain with a young person, but if it's not something that you're going to dive into and focus on, then you wouldn't necessarily open that service domain and track, progress over time. The monthly report is supposed to measure progress over time and sort of be a reference on what the main priorities are. Does that generate any immediate questions before we dive into the example?
Okay. So this is Matt. He's been with us for since August, so well over the 3-month period. Again, we needed some caseworker contact with Matt's caseworker. So you have 2 places in which to show that. You can check that up at the upper section, and then down below in the needed, you can also check caseworker contact. So hopefully your caseworkers are seeing that. Let's see. Everybody was showing up to your Cooking Healthy class, so you guys had a great turnout. You met with Matt on January 12th and had some phone calls or voicemails and text messages going to him as well. Again, so now this is your regular basic ILP services. You no longer have that higher expectation of seeing them twice a month face-to-face. Of course, we love when you do, but it's not required. So once a month is fine. Then you have the group, let's see, you went to your group. This is when your next life skills assessment and transition plan will be due. So you've already done it. You would have reported that on the month that you actually submitted it and listed the dates that so you would have changed from due. If it was done that month, this would have said done, and then you would have listed the date that you actually completed that. Then again, status for employment. You don't have to worry about the closed section because he's still working. Now for this young person, because you've worked with him for a while and it's within 6 months, and you haven't changed what you're working on in that 6-month period. So you can click no change since last report. So this is what you had on last report, was that these will stay because this is where you have assessed him at, but these being the check boxes for anyone who's just listening and not looking at what I'm doing, but I am on the monthly progress report for Matt. And so these will stay the same throughout your 6-month period unless they actually have moved up since you submitted your first monthly report where you had staged that young person. And when you go from, if this young person had actually started at stage 1, and within the 6-month period you said, nope, we moved right along we're now doing stage 2. We'll go down to the one that's open. We're on to stage 2. Then when you submitted that new stage 2, you would not have had the checkbox saying no change. That would be blank, or it would not be checked. And that would mean that Jenny really needs to take a closer look to see what you did in the month that was different. So she would have noticed, oh, look, they went from stage 1 to stage 2. So in our system, she would be logging you as achieved in the Access database. She would be logging you as achieved, stage 1 is achieved, and now you're open at stage 2. So this is where you get those incremental, I don't know what you want to call them, bonus points, cookies, stars, brownies, whatever you want to call them. You get credit for having moved that young person from one stage to the next stage. That will be tracked in our system. Jennifer or Carrie, either one of you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, this is Jennifer. I think, Yeah, just to sort of reiterate and underline what you just stated, I would want people, you know, to know that the way we designed the system, that you shouldn't feel like it's a negative thing to say that to put something, to close it as partially achieved or as not achieved, if that actually reflects how well you felt you were able to deliver the services you meant to deliver. So the monthly progress report is meant to capture that we understand that there are going to be youth engagement barriers and systemic barriers that get in the way of doing what you planned on doing. So the purpose of reporting whether things were partially achieved or fully achieved or that you didn't make any progress is so that we learn sort of what's working and what's not working. So I think that's balanced out by the fact that, like Rosemary said, you're every time you're moving from stage to stage and just sort of a natural progression, that those are, you know, quote unquote wins that you're logging where services went as planned. So I guess don't feel hesitant if you do need to report that you're closing something as partially with some progress or with no progress. But then also that may be an opportunity to pause and see if there's anything you could go back and revisit with the youth to maybe bump that up if that's more comfortable. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about that?
Hey, thanks, Jennifer. So, so this is what one of your monthly reports might look like for somebody you've been serving for a while. Again, if you had submitted a monthly report that looked like this previously and there was no change, you would check the no change box. You're still kind of rolling along with the services that you had anticipated. But if you've changed, like for this one where it's open on hold, we were working on health education and risk prevention, but something came up and that wasn't something that we're focusing on right now. So we plan to get back to that next month. So for this month, it's open on hold. And hopefully next month when that comes in, that is just open. Wow, somebody's got a big old long question for us. Who is that? We have a couple of them. Okay, so one question that we had was going back to the invoice, which I want to do now. Let's see, let me finish the monthly progress report. So again, we just had caseworker contact, otherwise Matt is engaging. We met with Matt at the YMCA, shot some hoops, discussed school, money management, healthy relationships. Oh, that should say Matt. Matt attended the group session on Cooking Healthy, and he placed a call to that darn worker, Rosemary, and left a message saying that Matt wants to join the baseball team this spring, and you need some assistance with the fees and equipment. So just real brief overview of what it was that you did with that young person. Okay, with that, we're going to jump back to any questions about the monthly progress report? Okay, we have a question. If a youth has been working with you past the first 90 days, but 1 month does not meet with you, how's that impact? How we report the status as open versus open on hold, or do we make mark as no change? Oh, there's a good question, Kelsey. Look at you. Not a scenario I had thought about. What you would mark up above, right? If you had a no-show, you're marking no-show. And I'm hoping that when the final version comes out, you're not having to do what I'm doing right now. I'm hoping you can just click on it and it's going to check. So we'll be talking with our forms people about that. But so you would be marking no-shows, you'd be marking that I attempt, so this would be blank because you had nobody show up. You would have no-shows, you'd say I tried to phone call, left voice messages, I also sent them texts, right? And so you're saying they also didn't show for your lovely workshop. Why they didn't show, we don't know. So then that's how you're going to mark that. And then down below, what you may check, right? You're going to check the nope, didn't participate. You could put not communicating. You could put if you know that, they're in sports and they're in counseling and they work and they were just too busy, then that might be something that you put, and you need caseworker contact because we need to figure out how to get that youth engaged, how to figure out a time to work with that young person that meets their needs. Or is this a young person who is not going to be able to participate in ILP because of their schedule, and hopefully they have wonderful foster parents who are teaching them most of the skills they need, and caseworker, you need to take over dealing with the transition plan, and we're going to close them out of ILP. So that goes way beyond your question. And then I would also mark right down below, Matt was a no-show. Whatever date you had your meeting set, he was a no-show. You contacted caseworker, blah, 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 whatever you did that month, because you want to show that you still worked on behalf of that youth, even though the youth didn't come and meet with you. So you could put no change, right? Because you're still working on, oh, I hate that. You're still working on everything. You're intending to work on everything that you had been working on. He just no-showed. So as long as you're documenting the fact that he no-showed, what you did do with the work that you put in on behalf of that young person's case and services, then that's all you would have to do. Kelsey, did that answer your question, hopefully?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Rosemary.
You're welcome. So we have a new question about a youth in the first 90 days. I understand on most youth during that time you have no service areas open on the monthly report because you're focusing on paperwork. But I just reopened a youth yesterday who I've worked with for 2 years in the past, and she went MIA after graduation and DHS closed her. She came back needing lots of help and almost in crisis. So she is in the first 90 days now, but along with that, I am focusing on employment and housing with her. She needs a job and safe, stable housing. So we're doing multiple meetings monthly to get paperwork done and other stuff done. Can I open those? Yes. If you are actually providing those services and you know it's going to wind up, right, without even finishing the assessment, that those are areas of need for that young person, absolutely you can open these. I guess my main purpose in showing nothing there was that it's okay, because we assume for a youth who's not in crisis and that you're just getting to know them, you haven't staged them yet, and so that's okay. But if you know, right, that person, maybe they're stage 3 because they had been on subsidy, but once we closed the case, the money went away. That young person has the skills, so for housing, they may be step 3, right, because they did have those skills, but they're just not using them right now. So you absolutely could check that and list that as open. And that's fine. And you could have the others being these dashes, right? Except for those areas that you know you're working with them right now. That's absolutely okay. That answer your question, Shannon?
Rosemary?
We have 8 new messages.
Kelsey, I have another question.
Yep.
So when a youth transfers from one ILP office to another, do we reopen them in 90 days as for our 90 days?
So if a young person moves from one ILP contractor to another ILP contractor, yes, the new contractor is starting fresh with that young person, unless we had someone who bounced back and forth in less than 6 months, right? If you had them for your 90 days, they moved, even if they moved just before the end of that 90 days, if you had them, you got through the assessment, you got through, so you got through the discussion guide, assessment summary, we're starting on transition plan, and then they moved. If they come back to you in less than 6 months, you do not get to claim youth engagement services. However, if they started with, say, Polk County, and then and Polk was doing the 90-day period, and maybe they got to the 4th month, and now that young person moved to Marion County, so they're with your program, then you get to start the 90 days over. Just because the youth has done it all, you're a new provider, so that's a new client to you, so you will be starting new and getting to know that young person.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I know we also have another scenario, and I don't know if this is in the questions, we'll see if it is or not. We have another scenario about what if a young person is with my program and I have served them for the first 30 days. I met my criteria, or maybe I didn't meet my criteria. I met with them once in the month, but that we were supposed to have another meeting and the youth didn't show. we allow you to claim that first 30 days. So the first 30 days you get to say, yep, I'm billing for the youth engagement services. However, if in the next 30 days that youth still hasn't engaged, or they're only doing the minimum engagement of once a month, which meets our regular ongoing ILP, then you cannot bill for the youth engagement services. You can only bill for your regular 1/12 payment. And so I think we're good with the monthly progress reports unless we had more questions out there. So I'm going to switch us back to the invoice real quick.
This is Jennifer, and I actually had something I wanted to say. So that's good timing. I remember last week something that came up was how do you account for the difference between sort of circumstantial reasons you might not have seen a youth for a month, or maybe you saw them but you didn't work on a particular domain that you already had open, versus engagement. And one of the things that we had clarified was if it's circumstantial and you know exactly why you didn't work on something that month, like maybe you're waiting for someone to call you back, or you're just waiting for paperwork to go through, or they're working steadily on something and just they didn't need your support that month on it, just you can leave it open. You can also use the open on hold for situations where in a couple months you'll be going back to it. So if you're working on employment and they're going to have a summer job but it's a couple months away, you could put that on hold. When you would close it with no progress or some progress is when the youth is telling you, through their words of behavior, that they are not engaged on that topic anymore, and you've attempted to re-engage them on the work you were doing around that domain, and they're not there with you. That's when you would close something with either no progress or some progress, knowing that you could always come back to it at a later date. And then that reminds me, Rosemary, we need to remember to talk about the closure date on the monthly report if we haven't yet.
In the scenario that I talked about, where let's take this young person, Haley, who started with us on December 15th. So the first 30 days would have gone to January 15th. And then by the end of January, 1st of February, I know that I did not engage with them past, I didn't get my 2 face-to-face visits in, and I sure didn't come close to doing 4 hours on behalf of that young person. And so I would end the youth engagement services on, hopefully that went in the correct cell. No, it didn't. I don't know where that went. Oh, yes, it did. There's Haley. And so I'm going to end my youth engagement services because this is the end of the first 30 days, right? We say we're giving you the first 30 days. However, the end of January came, I'm doing my billing. I know I am not meeting my requirements. So I'm ending January 15th. Or if this young person would have started the 1st of January, you could have billed for the whole month of January. Oops, sorry about that. But now it's the end of February, 1st of March, and that youth at the very end of February said, okay, yep, I'm recommitting. Had a talk with my caseworker, my foster parent, and even my best friend said, what are you doing? You need to participate. So they come back. And now they're working with you for the last 14 days, and maybe a couple of days in February, where, yep, they're meeting with you weekly. Maybe they came and see you a couple times a week. And so you can bill then for the final days that you're providing services at that higher level, and you're seeing them twice a month. So you can't, somebody said, can we pause the 90-day? I had that question. I'm like, well, not exactly. You're not, because the 90 days is the 90 days. You're going to pause on your billing for youth engagement services if you're not providing and that youth is not engaging. Then you can't bill. But then once they reconnect and they start engaging again, you can bill for what remains of the 90 days. Does that make sense? Do you all follow where I went with that? So we have a question.
And we also have
that kind of goes to what I was just talking about. Is the first 90 days based on meetings or time spent? Example, the last youth I was talking about, we have a meeting scheduled next week, scheduled for 5 hours. Holy moly, you're going to do one meeting, 1 5-hour meeting. Wow. To finish her assessment and job search together. So I will only see her one day, but we will have spent lots of time with each other. So that wasn't the intent, but you are meeting the hours. So I would send that question in to me so that I can give you an approval for that, because if you look at the letter of the law and what we have in the contract, you're supposed to see them twice a month face to face. So when you have that type of situation, shoot me an email so that we can take a look and I can allow you an exception to what's in the contract of the twice a month. Because I mean, you're engaging that young person, that's for sure. So again, the intent was not to burden, if you will, a youth. Now your young person may be in such a crisis that that's not a burden. They need that help, so they're gonna dedicate that time, and that's great. But often we know young people are not going to be willing to sit there for more than probably a couple of hours and talk to you. So again, email me and we can work on seeing whether or not that's a reasonable reason to have an exception. And I just want to give you that to put it in your case file, because when we come around, which will be coming soon for program reviews, right, we're looking to see, are you meeting the expectations of the contract? And unfortunately, it's very black and white. It says you're supposed to meet twice a month face to face. And if we saw this particular case, we would go, nope, that was only once. But the other thing is it's within the 30 days as well. So while that may be at the end of 1 month, when did you start serving her? Because the 30 days may go into the next month. And if you get that next meeting in before the end of that 30 days, then that's a yes, you've met the requirements. That is not. Okay. Yep. That's right. Right. It's not normal, but it happens, right? You have these crazy situations that happen. And so I just, for your own files, and so that as we come out and we do program reviews, if they happen to get selected for an audit, you would have documentation that says, nope, we're good, don't ding us, don't say we didn't comply because we have permission to do this way. Hopefully that makes sense. So I had somebody ask to come back to the invoice because they wanted to see the service category and type. So again, for youth engagement, it is ILP contract payment. Youth engagement is the service type. Scroll up just a little bit. There we go. So service category, service type. That's for youth engagement. The 1/12 contract payments is life skills ILP paid and ILP skills training bundled. So those are the two different, and those again are very important that you have the correct ones on the correct invoice. Tab 1, contract invoice, is for your youth engagement services. Tab 2, 1/12 payments, is for your regular ongoing monthly payments. So Jennifer, Carrie, and Jenny are scanning IMs. Did I miss any of the questions that have come through the IM system?
Not that I've seen.
Okay. Are there other scenarios out there that we did not cover? Oh, so I think I answered this question, but I'll say it again because I don't remember if I answered the question. And then Jennifer, remind me of the question that you had. So if you have those young people who, one of the questions is, when do I have to update the transition plan and do the full assessment summary? So you would do those when your young person comes up to their 6-month updates. So if you just did a 6-month update in December using the old format, then you don't have to do a new youth transition plan until their 6-month update. Again, you may want to start filling out the youth assessment summary based on your knowledge with that young person, because that's gonna help you also fill out your monthly progress report along with step 4. And I would highly suggest, if you just completed a transition plan with the old method, that you go ahead and use that service planning checklist to help you identify what level of skill building you're going to provide to that young person. Jennifer, did I answer the question that you had earlier?
My question was, well, I know we have someone typing in a question into IM right now. And then I had missed if you had gone over on the monthly progress report when you put in the closing date for the domains and why versus the overall closure.
I think I touched on that, but I don't think I did a very good job, actually. I don't think that's one that I got to. So who did we lose that I might have a report for? I did a report for Kevin George, right? He's a bad example, but I'll bring his up. Okay, so Kevin was one who terminated. Let's assume that he was with us for like a year. So let's uncheck that 90 days. And forget all of that other information up there. So he was with us for a year. So we would have, and again, I really wish I could just click on these and that they would fill in. So we're gonna use these to say, oh, we did some progress on this one. Oh, and you have to move it. Again, I really hope you just have to click on these. Oh, see? Not on hold. Say close completed. This is very frustrating right now, how I have to do this. And I hope that is going to change for you all. So if that was closed some progress and say the rest of them, that most of them are saying close some progress because you just didn't quite get to where you were going. It's not that he left your program because he achieved. He left your program because he maybe moved away for college or whatever that might be. So high school's completed. So you have a mix of completed and some progress. Then what you're going to do is come up to your when did I close, so list the date, and then take a look at, based on all of the ways that you close the various individual skills domains, what is your overall? For this person, I would at least put a partially achieved as my overall. And then again, this partially achieved will transition over to your monthly invoice, your 1/12 invoice, and you're going to list Matt as closed on January 6th, and your overall closure reason for your ILP services is partially achieved. Does that make sense? So you will need to help make sure that whoever's doing your billing for you knows that you closed, not only did you close Matt on the 6th, but your overall closing status was partially achieved. And where you would show that, and so Jennifer, talk if you need, or if you have something to say, because it's going to take me a minute to shift over again.
Okay, so one of the things that you may have said was that the month services closed column on the right, that's going to be populated for anybody that, as you're closing individual domains, excuse me, I'm a little froggy, I have a cold right now. As you're closing individual domains, you're filling in a date there to let Ginny know when to close them in Orchid. Can you leave the date there? It's kind of cumulative. So then you know, okay, I closed something with some progress back in June. And then a few months later you can say, oh, you know what, this might be a good time to reopen it. They seem ready to re-engage on this. Versus towards the end, by the end, when you're closing the entire service and you're filling out the overall achieved, partially achieved, or not achieved, then you're going to have to put in a closure date for everything that you're closing that was open that month, that you're closing the overall service, if that makes sense.
And if your young person has actually completed high school, let's say they graduated, they're moving on to college, then you would go ahead and say completed, and then whatever date they completed high school.
And Rosemary, do they need to put the exact date or just the month?
Preferably, if you have the exact date. I mean, some of these may have been listed at, except for January, because we know they closed January 6th. I mean, this Healthy Relationships, maybe you just dated that December 31st, right? Or December 2016, and then Ginny is going to put in December 31st, because we have to have an exact date in our system. So exact dates are helpful, particularly if it's in the middle of the month. But if you're closing at the end of the month, you could just put the month and year, and Jenny will then use the end of the month date in our system. Good question. Thank you. So we have a question. I have a youth that closed on January 7th, was in the end of her 90 days, open in October, but did not meet with me between January and January. But her paperwork was completed due to doing it in November. Do we bill for engagement for the 1 through 7 or not? I would not bill for youth engagement services. Well, as part of your, yeah, I mean, you didn't see her at all, right? Is that what I just read? Yeah, so I would not bill for youth engagement, but you are billing for regular ILP services. And you could close her January 1st as achieved if you were able to actually do all of that paperwork. Does that make sense? You're welcome. Okay, so I think, so everybody hopefully understands how to log closure of services, and thanks, I did forget to use the dates previously. So we always want a date, and you can leave, if you just leave them there every month, and so I don't know if your system allows you to like do a copy and paste. Just be careful, make sure you're pasting, that you're updating everything that needs to be updated if that's what you do, or not. We'll have it in our system, but if you just leave it there, that will help you eventually when you come to the time when you're actually just closing. The other thing is, if you say December 20th, you would close this family support and health relationships, but then in January you had some more conversations that young person wanted to talk to you about, then you can shift it back over to open and simply delete that date and then whatever level that you're open at. And then we'll know that you, of course, this particular scenario, he's closing overall January 6th, so it would say closed. So that's just, you can go back and forth, right? Just because you closed it doesn't mean you can't come back, and especially if it's not achieved or some progress, we know that you had more work to do, but maybe that just wasn't the time to work on it. So you're going to come back in a few months, or maybe the next 6-month update you come back and they're ready to work on that now. So you're going back in and you're opening. Could be same stage. What we don't expect to see is that a young person is lowering in a stage, because our sort of philosophy, if you will, is that if you move them to stage 2, if you were able to get them to stage 2 or stage 3, you have taught them the skills. Now, maybe they're not in a place to actually implement those skills at that level right now, but it's not that they don't have the knowledge or the abilities. Maybe there's just been something that's caused them a little bit of trauma, and they just can't focus on that right now. So they're just not, or maybe financially, right? So let's take housing as an example. They were on the subsidy, they did great. DHS closed that out. They, oh no, I'm going to lose my battery. No questions? Okay. And if you do wind up with a question, just give me a call and we'll be happy to. Again, what we're going to do is attempt to combine all of these questions and put out a frequently asked questions document. So hopefully that will help you. Okay, I think we read all of those. With filling out the documentation. So with that, if there's no further questions, I am going to say thank you very much for joining us. It did record. Thank you all very much. Bye.